Welcome to Coffee with the Journalist, a podcast featuring the tech industry's most well-known tech journalists. We uncover the real person behind the real stories you'd love to read. We discuss their beat and news coverage, what their inbox looks like, and a whole lot more. I'm Jared Martin, the co-founder and chief operations officer at OnePitch. Our host for the show is Beck Bamberger, the co-founder of OnePitch, CEO of BAM Communications, and a current journalist. On this week's episode, we're joined by Adam Popescu, who has bylines in publications including the New York Times, Businessweek, Vanity Fair, and the Washington Post. Adam shares more about his thoughts on journalists and journalism, the books he enjoys reading, imposter syndrome as a freelance journalist, and more. Let's have a listen.
Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with the Journalist today. Today we have on quite the contributing writer, and I'm very excited to have Adam Popescu on for us today. Adam, are you drinking anything particularly? Coffee, iced tea?
At the moment, I am dry.
Dry? Okay.
Yeah. No dry cough, but just nothing in my cup.
Nothing in the cup. Okay. We often don't have people drinking coffee on this Coffee with the Journalist show, so it's become kind of a funny thing of what people are actually drinking, but whatever floats your boat. So no need for anything. We'll just dive right in. Just a little bit on you for folks who are not familiar so much with you. You're quite the contributor. You have pieces that have been just in the top national outlets of the world, the New York Times, Vanity Fair, National Geographic, Bloomberg Businessweek, Washington Post. You also are an author of a great book, Nima, which was out last year in May. Highly recommend everybody checks that out, which we need to talk about, Adam. It's about a young Sherpa woman living in the foothills of the Himalayas.
Yeah, that's right. Light fare, right?
Light fare. I like this. And then as vast as your publication resume, your content has definitely varied and explored many stories covering, business and tech, personal profiles, including Mexican heads of states and film icon Steven Spielberg. So we need a lot. This is great.
Did you read my Hunter Biden story?
I did not.
Oh, come on. Beck, where are you at?
I read a couple things, but I have not read all your things because it's a lot. It's a lot. But why don't we start with just telling our listeners here, how do you write a great story? Where does it start from?
First off, thanks for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing and talking to journalists, because I think we are a group who are a bunch of know-it-alls who can't get enough attention. And if I'm going to take a page out of the honesty book, that's how a lot of us feel. So
yeah, that's okay.
But here we are, and in all truthfulness, the kind of stories that I think that I cover, I am really into story, and by that I mean I want to hear something that I haven't seen before. And if I'm going to cover a topic, there's that old adage that everything has been covered and everything has been written about or filmed. There's no real original ideas, and to a degree, it's true. There's only so many stories. There's stories about loss, stories about growing up, stories about love, stories about death, when you really break down the archetypes of what there is and the narratives. Mm-hmm. But given that, my approach, when I tackle a subject or a source, I want to show an audience either an element of that person that they may not have seen, or to share a moment in that person's life that was transformational, that brought them to where they are, mm-hmm. or just really be immersive and be visual with the writing so that a reader feels like they're there, because we have to compete against every other media platform, of whether it be film, mm-hmm. podcasts, everything. We're competing against this, and this is a more archaic medium. We're writing. We're in some room, clinking away on a keyboard when people don't have an attention span. Do people read in print? A lot of people don't. They're on their phones. So given all these limitations and the industry, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, you have to approach it in a very pragmatic and practical way.
Mm-hmm. So then therefore, how do you get to something like doing a profile on Steven Spielberg?
I think the one thing that you really have to do is you really can't say, you can't put a no on something. And by that, I mean, if you are ambitious and want to cover a topic or a person, you really have to exhaust all possibilities of reaching that person.
Oh,
I think that so many of us think, oh, well, they're too difficult, or they're too famous, or they're too busy, or whatever. And the great thing about the age we live in is that it can be easier in certain respects to reach people. There's publicists, there are email addresses that are out there are phone numbers. There's so many ways to circumvent what would be once more traditional approaches. And maybe at one point you write a letter. You physically write a letter, and then that gets that person, if you're lucky.
Has that been successful for you, an actual handwritten letter?
No, I don't. I think if we were in the time machine, maybe. But I think what I try to do is I try to be respectful and I try to be persistent. And I think that's a combination that a lot of journalists use. And I think that works for them.
So break that down a little bit, because I know publicists can relate to the art of persistence, right? Which has to be on the line of not being obsessive and annoying to the journalist. So I imagine when you're after getting that tip, getting that profile, etc., you need to use the same art as well. So do you have some suggestions for that on like what are the rules in your book of persistence that doesn't cross the line?
I think you have to be able to read between the lines. So many of us don't respond to emails in a timely manner. Does that mean that we don't care? Does that mean that it's a no? Or does that mean that we're just so busy that we haven't seen it or given it time? Mm-hmm. So everyone has their own rules of how many days they give, if they follow up again. I think I like to talk on the phone. I think that if you're comfortable picking up the phone to talk to a source, that is one approach. I know a lot of journalists do not like to be called by publicists, especially cold.
Yeah.
I don't really like it either, because it can be a bit unexpected, and unless you have a relationship with that person.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it all goes back to relationships. If you feel comfortable with somebody, there's a level of maybe intimacy, and of course not in a romantic way, but an intimacy in terms of I can reach out via text message, maybe, certainly email. But you have to really know who you're dealing with. It's almost easy to be transparent that you are just fishing for placing a product or placing your client. And that can be telegraphed. If you are a little more personal, real, a little more steeped in the subject, if you know what that person really covers. Also, you can't pitch somebody right after they run something on the thing that you're covering.
Yeah.
Or the thing that you're and a lot of publicists do that, and I don't think they get good mileage from that. Before the moment we're in, also a lot of FaceTime, being at events, meeting people, going the extra mile. And maybe even sometimes you read something from somebody has nothing to do with anything even in your field, but you can send them a note and tell them that it meant something to you, or that you connected with something. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee that goes a long way, because people appreciate that.
Yeah.
No matter what the field is.
Mm-hmm. Just acknowledgement. Isn't that great?
Yeah, I think it's good manners, and it's being genuine, and those things, unfortunately, are few and far between these days.
Mm. What do you think as it relates to the future of journalism? Usually we cover that more at the end, but I kind of just rolled into that because I thought it was appropriate here. What do you think of the future of journalism?
I want to know what you think from your standpoint.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for asking. I believe I'm optimistic, quite. I believe there's definitely a need for it in, the era of Trump, or the era of the virus, or just in a functioning democracy like never before. What we're seeing currently out of the transparency of China, for example, is not an ability to really know what the real deal is out there. And that's a downfall of lack of transparency and lack of true journalism there. So that's another reminder. But also, I'm really bullish on the notion that journalists are having a rise of, and celebrity is not the right word, but let's say social icon or iconic place in our culture more and more, with being authors of these great topics. And an example is Bad Blood, which was explosive and it was a bestseller and all these great things. But a lot of journalists who can become massive influencers, not only just on their Twitter following, but in great books that they write that become hits as they command stages more and more. And just kind of similar to how chefs were never that, long before the shows came out, that really put them as like, wow, these really creative and masterful people. I kind of feel journalists are going to have that moment, and are having a bit of the moment, not explosively yet, not at the pinnacle, but that we're on the way to that. That's where I stand.
I think you're right that we're definitely in a moment when news has become an entertainment commodity in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
I had a story for the New York Times recently about a literary event series, which sounds like a nothing little thing, but presidential candidates now go to this. It's almost like a literary salon. It's a place where everyone from Kamala Harris to Amy Klobuchar to Elizabeth Warren to Bernie Sanders,
Oh
they
yeah,
all were staying.
yeah.
Yeah, they all basically the point I'm trying to make is that people are so into what's going on television, in the White House,
Mm-hmm.
in our very complicated daily lives, that they look to these reporters and newscasters in a way as tastemakers, as celebrities that are
Mm-hmm.
the word celebrity in a different way in terms of someone being actually famous, not being a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at them for guidance because they want to trust them. And they're also so goddamn interested and fascinated and salivating for the next story, the next whatever, because it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You could never make it up. So once the purview of a novelist,
Mm-hmm.
the movie Contagion, when it came out several years ago,
I know.
people thought, oh, that can never happen. The writer of that film was recently on Anderson Cooper, and he was saying that he could never even imagine the real life plot that we're in being in a film because it's just so wild.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows that the world we live in is already so hard on so many levels. It's so hard to understand. It's so hard to process. So hard to keep up. It's so hard to make a living.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that more and more. So people are just sucked in. And so when you ask about the future of journalism, I think like every other medium, you're going to have winners and losers. It exposes the wide gaps, and a lot of publications are doing quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Local news is not, because they don't have the bank, they don't have the kitty for that. But a lot of other places, despite the rhetoric, CNN is doing quite well. I'm sure Fox News is doing quite well. The New York Times is doing well. The Atlantic, all these big places. The worry is that maybe that it becomes too many just large spots, and that the local level gets smaller, and that we no longer have the watchdogs on a more on a smaller level. We don't have the weeklies because they're going under too.
Yeah.
So we're in a moment now where it's unfortunately the weak in the chafe are getting separated, and we're hoping for the best, but not an easy business.
It's not. For anyone who's listening or wanting to know, the title of this New York Times piece that you're mentioning here, Adam, is called A Literary Stop on the Campaign Trail. It's all about writer's block, which is that LA reading series. And it's been around for like 25 years, 24 years, it says in the article. But, it's great piece. Great piece. Highly recommend people check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks for that little part, Adam, on just the future journalism. You're one of the now, I'd say, many in this season of our podcast that are optimistic, I'd say, not as pessimistic. Season 1 was quite pessimistic. I'm curious how this is changing and evolving. So kind of interesting to see.
Well, we don't have a drink. We don't have a drink pouring right now. So I'm like I said, I'm dry.
We could. What do you like to read? Whether it's journalism type, articles, outlets, etc.
Yeah.
Or just books?
So I have a daily subscription to the Times, to the New York Times, which is, it's exhausting, to be quite honest, to keep up. But I think it's very important, and I want to see. And I also like to see myself in the paper, and I save the copies, and I feel good. Show my mom. I also have the Financial Times in print on the weekend, which I think they're a fantastic publication. And I get The Economist.
Oh, and do you read The Economist back to back every week, though?
It's another one that it almost feels like homework sometimes, and it's exhausting.
It is. I was a subscriber for years, frankly, and my background's in economics, and I love econ, but my God, it's hefty.
Well, the thing about these other papers is they have a more European or global worldview that American papers don't have. So The Economist
it's very global.
These are fantastic. I have in fact, next to my bed, I have, if I don't read it after a few weeks, I'll go through the magazine and cut out some of the articles I want to read. But it is, because of the nature of my work, I have to be up to date, and I have to be following, and I can read in print in a more deep way than if I would online.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have that, but for pleasure, I read a lot of books. I just read The Kingdom and the Power, which is by Gay Talese. It's already quite a bit dated, but it's about the history of the New York Times. It was written in the late 60s. And reading that book today, I mean, it could have been written yesterday. It's so fascinating about the politics,
Really?
the history, the inner workings, a lot of the archetypes and the tropes and the narratives. You can see that today, and it's just, for me, it's fascinating. It's very much inside baseball to a degree.
Okay.
And then I'm reading. I'll tell you one more, and I'll shut up. But I'm reading All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren, which is also another classic, and it's from. It was written in the late 40s. I don't just read the book club stuff, although I do keep up to date with current stuff. I just read William Dalrymple's The Anarchy, which is about the British East India Company and the rise of India, which I find fascinating. There's not enough time in the day. You know what I mean? But I do consider myself a bibliophile, and I do love to read.
It's great. I'm such a sucker myself. I just got All the King's Men, put it on my Audible there. Ooh, it's hefty, 20 hours.
Well, watch the movie. The movie will just, if you haven't seen it, it's another classic.
I will. Okay, well, let's shift to our word association game. So I'm just going to give you a word, Adam, and you just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. How about that?
Are we going to edit it out if it's bad?
Yes, we can edit.
All right, great.
Usually there's some surprises in here. So, okay, here we go. Food.
More.
Drink.
Yes.
Hobby.
Oh, good question. I have to redo that after Corona. We'll talk about that one.
Okay. How about the New York Times?
Tough.
Steven Spielberg.
Humble.
Oh, isn't that refreshing? Dalai Lama.
Rolex. He wears a Rolex.
What?
He's full of contradictions. He's very playful guy.
I heard he was, and when I listen to interviews and hear him on books and stuff, you could sense that like joy that just is like resonating out of him. It's just wonderful. But wow, would have never thought that.
Yeah.
How about freelance?
Oof, very tough.
That's a word. We'll take oof.
Yeah, oof is right.
Journalism.
Exhausting.
Pitch.
Daily.
Inbox.
0.
Oh, okay. So that leads me to this next part, which is how does your inbox look? Is it filled with pitches? Do you read every pitch? What happens in there?
I have to have my inbox really clean, or else I don't think I could be functional. Is the real truth. You know, I do have folders. You have to be, at least from my experience as a reporter, you have to be really, really disciplined and really know where everything is, because it's just, things pile up super quick. So I don't really follow, I don't get on email chains or newsletters. I try to respond as quickly in real time as I can. One reason being, I want people to treat me that way. So I try to be respectful and return as fast as I can. And I do read, I would say 90-something% of emails and pitches.
Wow. 9? That's the highest percentage I've ever heard on this show.
I think most people do, even if they just scroll through. Even if they don't respond and they're scrolling, they're making some kind of determinant saying it's not important or that's not worth my time. But if someone actually, if it's a form email and they just dropped your name in, or they just say, hi with 3 exclamation points, and they just obviously don't know who the hell you are, then delete. But if they seem to be genuine and seem to put some time in, I'll respond. It doesn't mean I'm not going to obviously be able to accommodate and actually write about lots of things. But, I'll tell them that. I'll tell them thank you, and I'm not able to take on new material, or some of these people end up becoming resources in the future. It's about building these connections. And I think the good ones, they don't take it personal. Sometimes very junior people will get flustered easily, or not really know the way that the game is played, and they take it personal. And that's something that's happens quite a bit, and you have to keep your cool. But I think from my perspective, the job of a good publicist, it's not to be the gatekeeper, it's to be the facilitator. You are trying to get the message of your client and you're trying to connect them with the reporter. And then you stand back. You can't be expecting to control the story, to shape it. You do your best. You do your best to put two figures together, and you have to be a professional to know, in effect, your job is then done. And then if they need more of either side, you serve them. You don't get all insert yourself into it. And depending on the level of access or what have you, then that can be more challenging.
Do you get to zero every single day?
Oh yeah, I'm at zero all day, every day.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You're like email superstar, because I have not heard more than 90% of emails read and then getting to box zero.
I got one email that just popped up at 3:15.
Wow.
But so much of this stuff is time sensitive.
Yeah.
I have to respond to this edit because the story's going up.
Yeah.
It's running in print on Monday. It's Friday now.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. I can't afford to be.
Yeah.
When someone tells me that they're a freelancer, I often used to think, oh, that means you're probably not good enough to be on a paper or on staff somewhere, or that you don't really work. And that was my own judgment, because I've met a lot of people like that. And then I think to myself, oh, do people think that about me? And it's quite easy to have imposter syndrome and to feel like you're not good enough. But I think the truth is that if you're freelancing on a consistent level, and that's your whole income, no one's just giving it to you because they like you.
Yeah.
I mean, you better work it, and you're always judging the last thing you did, and you can't afford to falter or not respond in time, because then they move on. You have to be easy to work with in addition to being good and delivering. But otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. Well, on that note, we're going to play a Mad Lib, which is my favorite part, Adam, of doing these.
I hope I'm fast enough for you over here.
No, sometimes people get a little stumped, so we'll see. But sometimes they're actually remarkably accurate, as some people have said. So let's see how this goes. How about a catchphrase, just a general catchphrase?
How about, I'll give you a really cliche, corny one. Do your best.
Do your best?
Yeah.
Excellent. What about a journalist scare phrase?
Breaking news.
And then how about a buzzword in journalism that's positive?
I'll give you a negative one.
Okay.
Layoffs.
That would be one.
See, my brain goes to negative before positive.
Hey, that's all right. What about an adjective?
How about I do this? I'm going to just read one off the front page that it's overused.
Perfect.
Where was it over here? Mild-mannered. Talk about cliche.
Mannered.
What does that even mean? That you're not yelling?
I don't know. Because if you're mannered, isn't that mild? And it's okay. Anyway, what about part of a pitch?
Here's the news peg.
Here's the news peg.
Geez, we sound like we're like back in the 40s right here. Here's the news peg.
What about an adjective?
Robust.
Robust. And then a part of a pitch again.
Please respond.
Please respond.
That's a pretty pathetic one.
That is. Who puts that in a pitch? Please respond.
No, come on. I don't know who would put that in a pitch.
I don't know, but that'd be pretty funny. I'm going to try that next time. Please respond.
Please respond. Let's see what your rate is on that one.
Yeah.
0.
Amount of time.
Too much.
What about another adjective?
Fading.
What about singular noun?
How about dog?
Dog. I like.
Dog is a noun. I have a master's degree, and I don't really know what a pronoun, adjective. These are tough questions.
And then a topic.
You mean besides the bubble we're living in right now, that it'll still be extended forever?
Yes.
Here's the topic that I would like us to talk about more or feel, and that's hopeful.
Yeah. A verb that ends in ing.
Living.
And then this is the last one, just a regular verb, whatever verb comes to mind.
I have to say die now.
What'd you say?
I said die.
Die? Oh my God.
Yeah, if we can't say living, and now I'm going to die. See?
Okay. Yep. Okay, this is going to be definitely an interesting one. Here we go.
It's Friday afternoon.
It is, thank God. Actually, it's been a long week. Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
To me, journalism is about doing your best. It consists of breaking news and layoffs on the daily. If a pitch has a mild-mannered, here's the news peg request, I will absolutely respond to it. However, if a pitch has a robust, please respond, you can expect no reply from me. If too much time goes by and you don't see an email back from me, you can just assume I am not fading about it. The best stories always have a dog and are usually about hopefulness. The best way to reach me is by living, but you can also reach me by just dying.
There's some truth in that.
This is some truth. I think it's somewhat accurate. I do like, my favorite is the best stories have to do with a dog and are hopeful.
I did recently profile Dog the Bounty Hunter, so,
See? Did that story do well?
Oh, come on. Dog the Bounty Hunter.
It probably was a record breaking, I imagine.
He is a real special character. He's a real, again, complicated, but people love dogs.
Also true. Adam, thank you for being here today. Drink or no drink. This was fun.
Beck, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist featuring Adam Popescu. The goal of our show is to give you an in-depth look into tech industry's most well-known and coveted tech journalists, and we hope you found today's episode insightful. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere else you enjoy listening to podcasts. We'll see you next week with an all-new guest and even more insights. Until then, let's quit bitching about pitching and start great stories.